Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Super C series. Last video we got the tractor running, but it wasn't running very well. I made the assumption that it was the carburetor. So this video I'm going to focus mostly on fuel delivery, although we will do some other random things as well. I got the new sediment bolt in the mail. I'm happy with what I see on this one right off the bat. I can see evidence of some thread sealant in there. So because of that, I'm not going to remove that valve and look in there. We're just going to make the assumption that everything is good. We'll check just briefly here to make sure it's tight. Yeah, it's tight. And this one as well. Yeah. The only thing we don't know is if the fitting size is the same as that was on the old one. They actually included a fitting for the line, which is unusual. This is the fuel line that came off the tractor, and yeah, it's the same size. We're not going to reuse this line though, because you can see the this fitting is all jacked up. It's all rounded off and smooth. The one on this side is okay. It's just a standard compression nut, but I'm going to get some whatever size this is. I don't know if that's 5/16 or what. Yep, 5/16. So I'm going to use my favorite thread sealant, gas oil standard. I mention this stuff a lot on the channel. I know a lot of you guys are already aware of it, but this is really good stuff. And I think I can say I've had a 100% success rate when using gas oil as a thread sealer or as a gasket sealant. We've already got the tank drained, so there shouldn't be any gas coming out besides maybe just a drip or two. And we're just gonna thread this guy right in. All right, she's installed. I've got the valve closed, and we'll just let that sealant set up for a little while, and then we'll come back and put some gasoline in the tank, make sure it doesn't leak. We're also going to get this carburetor removed. Got these 2 bolts on top, and then just the 2 linkages, the throttle governor rod and the choke rod. The throttle governor rod is in the back there. This is the larger one towards the front, and this is the choke control rod right here. It's going to be a couple days before I put the replacement carburetor on this, so we're just going to cover up the ports with some Gorilla Tape just to keep any insects and creatures from getting too curious and trying to crawl in there. Now, while we're waiting on some other things, let's check the air intake. Oh my goodness, I can't get... Well, if this is rusted on there, it must have been a long time since anybody's looked inside this. It's always interesting what you find in the bottom of these oil bath air systems. Bugs, that's normal. But luckily, this looks like a solid cup. A lot of times they're rusted out on the bottom and you can't use them anymore, but this one looks pretty good. The oil looks super thin. So let's go ahead and dump this. If you look up inside these filter elements from the bottom like this, you can't really tell how dirty they are. Even still, this one looks pretty clean on the bottom. Here we are on the top now. This piece here doesn't seem like a factory piece, does it? Seems kind of out of place. Does this come off? Well, it's dirty, but I've seen worse. It's actually pretty decent all the way down through the pipe. Well, I blew some air through there and ran some solvent up there and let it drip out. And it's running clean now, so I think we can make the safe assumption that the filter is decent. I also ran some solvent all the way up through the air pipe, all the way up to the top. Use your motor oil of choice and fill it up to the fill line on the bottom and put it back on. I also cleaned this top piece out a little bit. It just sits on there, and then our suspect cap goes on to keep the rain and everything, insects and everything out of there, or at least try to. Well, I've seen better exhaust couplers. This is just a big old pipe fitting, of course. Is it just sitting on there? Oh my goodness, it's just sitting there. I made myself a custom coil mount. So it bolts to the top of the magneto, and then the coil bracket bolts to the top of this thing. And we're just waiting for those to finish drying, and that'll work out great. Now, although this looks like a Zenith carburetor, this is actually a Carter carburetor. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Carter. In fact, a lot of people say Carters work better than some of the others. They're supposed to be pretty decent carburetors overall. But the problem is that they can sometimes be hard to get parts for. So because I don't want to deal with trying to find parts now or later for this thing, I'm going to switch to a Zenith. Those parts are much more common, easier to get, and I found a guy online that's selling a rebuilt Zenith, completely rebuilt with a warranty. And he'll take this Carter as a core exchange. I normally rebuild my own carburetors, but in this situation, I'm going to go with the Zenith. Well, look what I found on my shelf. 5/16, brand new. It looks like I used part of it and cut it off here. So we have everything we need to reproduce this piece. So all I need to do now is bend this straight one to kind of match this one, and then we can fine tune it when we get the carburetor back and install it on the tractor. But if I shoot for this basic shape, we should be pretty close when we're done. The way I do this is I make a mark where the apex of our first bend is going to be, which is right about there. And then I'll make that bend, and then I'll make the next mark at that apex, and so on and so forth. And 5/16 is pretty strong stuff. You're not going to be able to bend, little sections like this with your hands, so you need some kind of a tool to help you. So I'm going to use my bender tool and put my mark right on the center of the top of the tool there, and pull down like this. And then we come back. So that's pretty close. I actually bent it just a little bit too much. Well, let's bend it back just a hair. Yeah, that looks all right. Now, for the apex of the next bend, it's going to be right about there, and we're going to go that way. Bend it a little bit more there. And here's what I ended up with. Pretty close. I intentionally left it long on both ends so we'd have some to play with in case we need to manipulate it more than I think we do. But as far as the fittings, we can just slide the fittings on to see how it will look. That looks pretty good, so we're going to leave it alone for now. Wait till the carburetor arrives, then we'll install it on the tractor and we'll cut it to length and finish manipulating it so it fits just the way we want it to. All right, let's put some fuel in the tank and make sure the sediment bowl doesn't leak. All right, I've got a couple gallons in the tank. The valve is closed. We have no leaks at the top of the sediment bowl, which I didn't expect we would. That's where I put the gasoil. Now we're going to open the valve on the sediment bowl and let the bowl fill up. I just want to make sure that the valve doesn't leak on the exterior like the last one was. I want to make sure the bowl isn't leaking as well. We might have to tighten the bowl, we'll see. But remember, the output port on the other side is completely open, so there might be some gas that comes out of the other side. I put a little cup here to catch it, but mainly we're just looking at the valve here and the top of the sediment bowl, make sure they don't leak. So we'll just crack this open, and now we're getting fuel. Should get to the top, and then we should see some coming out the output port into that little cup on the other side. See that stream? We got no leaks over here at the valve and no leaks at the bowl either. I'm going to close the valve, and it stopped. So that is excellent. We finally got a good sediment bowl. Everything seems to work. So we're going to leave that in place and wait for the carburetor to arrive. So we know in that little time that I did get it to run that the alternator is charging the battery. The belt is way too loose and it's a little bit ratty. So let's tighten up this belt, and then once I get it running, we'll spray some of this belt conditioner on both belts. The larger belt down here is actually tensioned well, but it's pretty dry too, so maybe that belt conditioner will help a little bit. Well, the alternator seems to be stuck. All right, I got it unstuck. Let's pull it out. Oh yeah, that's much better. All right, the new carburetor is here. And I have to say, this is one of the nicest looking rebuilt carburetors I have ever seen. Excellent paint job, new hardware. He even put the fuel inlet in the correct orientation because the fuel line comes down at kind of an angle. A new drain valve, and he even included 2 new cotter pins, one for the choke rod and one for the throttle governor rod. That is a nice looking carburetor. I'm going to go get this installed on the tractor, and then I'll bring you back when it's time to put the fuel line on, and we'll go from there. All right, the carburetor is on. Let's see how much we need to trim on our fuel line here. First of all, I want to take maybe 3/4 of an inch off this side, so we'll do that, and then check it again over here. It's about 29 degrees outside right now, so it's a little cold to be working on metal objects. All right, I like it on the sediment bowl end now. I don't want to take off a whole bunch here, maybe just about a 3/16. Supposed to warm up to about 55 today later, so that'll be nicer. When the sun comes over the house, it always warms up a little bit too. But right now I'm in the shade over here by the shop. All right, let's try this. Perfect. All right, both fittings are tight. I'm going to open the valve on the sediment bowl and we're going to watch for leaks. We shouldn't have any leaks at this point. All dry up there so far. All dry down here. I'm gonna go warm up my hands a little bit and we'll let this sit for about 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure we don't have any leaks. Then we'll come back and try to start it up. All right, hands are warm. Let's go start it up. So right about now is when I started to get frustrated. And what I try to do in these situations is just fall back to basics. So what do we need to get a gas engine to run? We need fuel, air, compression, timing, and spark. We've addressed and fixed all the fuel issues, so we're going to cross that off the list. I've inspected the air intake system. I know it's clear. We can cross that off the list. Compression is a big one. You got to make sure you have compression on all 4 cylinders. And here I am checking the compression on all 4 cylinders. They were pretty good across the board, pretty much the same on all 4 cylinders. So we can cross compression off the list. Ignition timing is a little trickier to hear with your ear. It starts pretty easily, it idles okay, but it does stumble on acceleration. So it could possibly be the timing. So the last thing on the list is spark. So we know I have some spark at least because the tractor is running. I removed all the spark plugs. I tested each one individually. They're all good. I checked the continuity in all of the spark plug wires. They were all good. We know the coil is good, and it looks like the points and condenser and rotor had been replaced recently by the previous owner. So what I'm left with is the possibility that we might be getting intermittent spark. Is it a timing issue or is it a spark issue? Like I said before, timing is a little bit tricky because timing at idle is completely different than timing at full advance. So I started to wonder if maybe something was wrong with the distributor itself. Maybe the mechanical advance is not working inside the distributor, and you don't get the timing to advance as you increase the throttle. It's going to fall on its face, it's going to pop, it's going to stumble just like it's doing. So what I ended up doing is I removed the cap. I removed the rotor, the dust cover, the condenser, and the points. And first I shot a bunch of brake clean behind the plate in there. There's a series of holes in the plate between the points and the advance mechanism. And then after that I shot a bunch of PB blaster in there, and I waited for that to drain out. Then I put the points and condenser back in the distributor and the dust cap, and when I put the rotor on this time, I bent the little prong on the top of the rotor. I bent it up a little bit just to make sure that it was making contact with the bottom of the inner distributor cap. Put the cap back on, got everything ready to go, started the engine, and it ran perfectly. So I'm not really sure what to think. Was the mechanical advance kind of stuck and rusted and not operating properly? Or just by bending that little prong up on top of the rotor, do you think that fixed the problem? I can't say for sure, but I'm happy that it's finally fixed and running well. So I'm going to start it up and let you guys hear it. And now that I've got it running right, we're going to put some dielectric grease on the shaft where the points ride, because you don't want them to be completely dry and then start running the tractor a lot. So I just smear a dollop on there with the screwdriver, and then when it starts to spin, it will end up on all 4 lobes. If you leave the shaft dry, what will eventually happen is the nub on the back of the points will wear down, and it will actually change your air gap on your points. So try to keep that lubed. And watch how easily it starts back up. So after 2 videos, I've got Gertie back up to operational running condition. At the end of this video, I'll put all my expenses so you guys can see what I actually had to purchase to get this thing running again. But there's going to be a lot more of Gertie in the future, so if you want to see what happens to her down the road, please subscribe and leave a comment if you'd like. And thanks for watching, everybody. I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. All right, it's the next day now, and we're going to start this with no choke, just to make sure everything's still good. Man, that sounds so much better than it did before.